Hi, welcome to Planet in the Word. I'm Candace, and this week you're going to do two things. You're going to finish up with Genesis, and you're going to move forward into Exodus. And before you do that, before we walk away from Genesis and all the foundation laying we've been doing, I'd like to spend just a minute on Genesis and look at it instead of with eyes from a modern Western culture, with eyes from an ancient Eastern culture, as they would have somewhat understood what was going on here back when it was written. We lose a little bit of what's going on because we don't have the perspective that they did. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on Genesis 49. And what's going on here is Jacob is getting ready to die. He has been reunited with Joseph in Egypt. All 12 brothers are there along with their descendants. In fact, we have the next generation really coming into its own. And Jacob is on his deathbed and he prophesies over his sons. And it's phenomenally prophetic. It's amazing to read. It's fun to follow and track as you move forward through scripture. But there's some things there that we don't understand quite what are happening that are really worth looking at a little bit closer. So let's just do that. So historically, what would happen when we were talking about sort of these family dynamics that were really somewhat tribal, if we understand them that way, anytime there was a firstborn inheritance, that is who would take over the next of the tribe. And that firstborn inheritance would inherit three things. He would inherit the finances of the father, exceptional amount of money. He would inherit the kingship or leadership of the tribe or clan. And then the third thing that he would also inherit would be the mantle of the priesthood. Those are the three things that were really handed down from generation to generation in the ancient Eastern culture. Those were the three positions that were held by the leader of each tribe or clan, all three. But we see a very unique thing happen in Genesis 48 and 49. And we're going to cover what that is today. And what Jacob essentially does is he divides up those three inheritances instead of handing them to Reuben, because Reuben defiled his father's bed and slept with his concubine. He gives those to the other sons and divides them up. And we see a very clear picture of it. In some cases, it doesn't come quite to fruition right away, but we see that Jacob is laying a foundation for it. So let's start with that. The first thing that Jacob does is he divides the heir. Now, and we're going to talk about the finances of that. This is the child that is going to receive the double portion. Now, what does that mean? In an ancient Eastern culture, let's say there were 4 sons. It would be the inheritance of finances, cattle, silver, gold, what have you, would be divided into 5 parts, with the firstborn or the inheritor receiving 2 parts. But with that inheritance, they often received the responsibility of the mother. So you got a double portion, but you also were to use what you would receive to take care of your father's wife. In this particular instance in Genesis, we see Jacob having an interaction with Joseph. Now, Joseph is one of his 12 sons, but Jacob claims paternity as far as grandfather of Joseph's 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. So Joseph brings them in, Jacob gets off his deathbed, and we have the whole scene with the crossing of the hands and the prophesying of the younger leading the older and the older serving the younger. But what we see is the tribes of Manasseh and Ephraim, or later listed always as Ephraim and Manasseh, receiving that double portion, that 2 get Joseph's 1 portion. So we see the financial inheritance of the double portion favor taken away from Reuben and handed over to Joseph. The second thing we see is we see Jacob take the kingship or the rulership of his tribe or clan or now family group, and of course when they leave their nation, and he doesn't give that to Reuben, he hands that over to Judah. And in fact, in Genesis 49:10, it says, "The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet. So what he's doing is he's taking that preeminence that Reuben had, and he is giving that preeminence over to Judah. And of course, we see that Yeshua becomes the Lion of the tribe of Judah, and that is where he descends from. And of course, after Saul, who was a Benjamite, David begins to rule, and he is the first king. And again, he comes out of the tribe of Judah. So we see that foundation laid here. The third foundation that's laid is actually not quite as prophetic, but the pieces are all there. Jacob has some very stern words for Simeon and Levi. And basically it's that you are bloody men, you're men of the knife. You've done these really horrific things, and therefore you're not going to have your own inheritance. You're going to be spread out among the tribes, other tribes. You don't get a land or a portion of your own. And that's interesting because that really does play out. Simeon's tribal land, when they went into Israel, was actually located within the tribe of Judah, and Simeon is actually absorbed by the tribe of Judah. The second thing that happens is Levi, while out in the desert, he is appointed the priesthood by God, and God says, you're not going to take an inheritance of the land, I'm going to be your inheritance. And so he spreads the Levites out amongst the 12 tribes, and he gives them their portion, again, scattered within the land of Israel. So those two sons, their prophecy that Jacob gives them really does come true. And what Jacob is then laying on his head and what God then uses with Levi is he gets the priesthood, that he serves the whole body throughout the whole land of Israel and not just in his own portion. So what we see happening as you read through Genesis 49 is the inheritance of the individual sons, their prophetic blessings or even admonishments as he goes through. But what he's also doing is dividing up the typical inheritance that firstborn Reuben should have received, and he's giving it and spreading it among 3 of his sons instead of just the one son. So once you see that, you can see that picture coming up over and over. I hope this helps give you insight. I hope you find it's worth your time. Thank you so much for stopping by. Have a good one. Bye-bye.